I thought Christmas would be simple. Quiet dinner, a few laughs, and gifts that came from the heart. But when my daughter Marina Hart walked into the living room with a giant ribbon wrapped folder and handed it not to me, but to her mother in law, everything inside me froze. Marina had bought her a beachfront mansion, not rented, not leased, purchased. And for me, a 30-minute massage voucher. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. I pretended to. But I wasn't hurt because I wanted the mansion. I was hurt because Marina was blind to how her husband's family pulled her strings, drained her accounts, and fed her lies about who deserved her gratitude. So while they celebrated, I quietly walked out and began digging. The next morning, Marina found a thick envelope on her doorstep, bank transfers, false invoices, and signatures she never approved. And when her husband called me in a panic, shaking, begging me to explain what I'd done, I realized he had no idea what I was about to expose next. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I'm 62 years old. I walked into my daughter Marina's Christmas celebration expecting warmth, family, and the familiar comfort of tradition. Instead, I stepped into a scene that felt strangely staged. Cameras out, forced smiles, and my son-in-law Wade proudly hovering beside his mother Phoebe as though waiting for a performance to begin. When Marina embraced me, I sensed something heavy in her eyes, something she was hiding. I told myself I was overthinking, but deep down, I felt a tension, a quiet cracking under the surface of our perfect facade. I had no idea that before the night ended, everything I knew about my daughter's marriage and the people she trusted would shatter in a way I couldn't ignore. The gift opening started beautifully, sparkling lights reflecting off wrapping paper, holiday music humming softly, until Marina reached for the giant ribbon-wrapped folder. Everyone leaned forward with anticipation. Wade's family exchanged glances, almost giddy, as if they already knew what was inside. Marina opened it, her hands trembling with excitement. The moment she saw the title deed, her face lit up until she read the recipient. It wasn't for her. It wasn't for me. It was for Phoebe, a beachfront mansion, fully paid, as a token of appreciation. My stomach tightened. Marina's voice cracked when she congratulated her mother-in-law. That was the instant I felt the emotional blade slide in. Clean, silent, and deliberate. Phoebe squealed dramatically, covering her mouth with both hands as if starring in her own reality show. Wade clapped like a proud director, and his sisters swarmed Marina, praising her generosity. Marina stood frozen, her smile hollow, the kind of smile you wear when you can't breathe. She glanced at me for half a second, just long enough for me to see the truth. She hadn't wanted this. It wasn't her idea. Something or someone pushed her into buying this mansion. The room buzzed with admiration, yet I felt only dread. A multi-million-dollar gift given to a woman who had never once lifted a finger for Marina. Why? The answer lingered like smoke, suffocating and poisonous. Then it was my turn. Marina handed me a small envelope with a hopeful little smile. Inside was a 30-minute massage voucher. 30 minutes. Not even an hour. The room fell silent for a beat, almost waiting for my reaction. Phoebe let out a tiny laugh she tried to hide behind her hand. Wade smirked. I felt heat rise in my chest, not from the cheap gift itself, but because Marina looked ashamed. Not for what she gave, but for what she was allowed to give. She whispered, "I hope you like it, Mom," with such fragile sincerity that I forced a smile. I hugged her tightly, not to thank her, but to steady her. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong. Phoebe paraded the mansion folder around like a trophy, showing it to every relative as if she'd earned it through pure virtue. Wade kept praising Marina for being responsible enough to invest in his mother's future. That word, responsible, sounded like a leash. Meanwhile, I watched Marina shrink into herself, nodding, agreeing, performing. Every compliment felt like a chain tightening around her. When I tried to sit beside her, Wade's sister inserted herself between us with syrupy sweetness, staring Marina back toward the in-law circle. It wasn't a celebration anymore. It was a display, a show of ownership, of control, of dominance masked as gratitude. Marina wasn't their daughter-in-law. She was their asset.
I caught Marina alone in the kitchen for barely 10 seconds. Her hands trembled as she poured herself water she didn't drink. When I asked if she was okay, she smiled. A thin, tired, rehearsed smile that didn't reach her eyes. She whispered, "It's just been a long day." But the look she gave me said, "Please don't ask here." Wade's voice echoed from the living room, calling her back. Marina flinched. That flinch? It was small, but it told me everything. This wasn't normal marriage stress. This was pressure, manipulation, maybe worse. I wanted to grab her and leave right then, but she straightened her shoulders, wiped her eyes, and walked out with the same uneasy smile. And something inside me snapped. As I prepared to leave, no one noticed, not Wade, not Phoebe, not even Marina, absorbed in their orchestrated celebration. I stepped out into the cold night, the air biting against my skin, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and fear. I replayed every detail, the forced mansion gift, the pitying laughter, the trembling hands, the swallowed words. That family had their claws deep into Marina, and she was too emotionally entangled, or too frightened, to see it clearly. I realized then that if I confronted them, they'd only tighten their grip. No, I needed proof, real proof. So I made a silent promise under the winter sky. I would find out exactly what they were doing to my daughter, and I would dismantle it piece by piece. The next morning, I opened my laptop and logged into the shared business portal Marina had once asked me to help set up. It was supposed to manage her boutique's finances, nothing more. But as I scrolled through her recent transactions, a coldness crawled through my spine. Thousands of dollars were being transferred every week, not to vendors, not to suppliers, but to an account labeled Family Support Services, something Marina had never mentioned. I checked timestamps. Most transfers occurred at midnight, long after Marina usually slept. My hands shook as I clicked deeper into the records. These weren't small withdrawals. They were systematically siphoning. Someone had turned my daughter's income into their personal pipeline. And Marina? She didn't even know. I remembered Phoebe casually mentioning shared household funds, a phrase that sounded rehearsed. So I dug further. The deeper I went, the uglier it became. Wade had registered a financial agreement under both their names, something Marina would never have agreed to, granting partial control of her accounts. It didn't make sense. Marina guarded her business finances fiercely. Yet here was a document claiming she'd signed off on shared access. Either she'd been manipulated or someone forged her permission. The worst part? Every transaction that drained her account matched a pattern. Wade's family struggling financially, then suddenly receiving anonymous support. My heart ached with equal parts fury and dread. This wasn't a one-time slip. This was an operation. I searched for Marina's signature on the agreement. When I found it, my breath caught. It wasn't her handwriting, not even close. Marina's signature had a looping M and a long tail on the A. This one was tight, rushed, slanted. Someone forged her name. My vision blurred with anger as I pulled up other documents, vendor approvals, account changes, new payment authorizations, 3 different signatures, all claiming to be hers. I knew Marina didn't handle digital paperwork at odd hours. I knew Wade often helped with her bookkeeping. And now it looked like he'd helped himself to her identity. My chest tightened. This wasn't just manipulation. This was fraud, woven into their family dynamic like it was normal. I drove straight to Marina's bank, gripping the evidence-filled folder like it was burning my hands. The bank manager, Mr. Lennox, greeted me politely until he saw the forged signatures and midnight transfers. His expression shifted, softened, then hardened. He lowered his voice and admitted he'd raised concerns months ago, but Wade insisted Marina had approved everything. She seemed pressured, he added carefully. That single word sent a chill through me. Pressure. He couldn't legally reveal more, but the way his eyes lingered told me he knew something was wrong. He printed the activity logs I requested and said quietly, "Be careful, Mrs. Hart. People who hide financial abuse don't usually stop willingly." The warning echoed in my mind long after I left. At home, I spread the printed documents across my kitchen table. That's when I saw it. invoice after invoice supposedly tied to Marina's boutique, yet none of the names matched her actual suppliers. These weren't small duplications, they were sophisticated fakes, with fake phone numbers, fake orders, and fake shipments, payments routed to offshore accounts under aliases, all connected to one central contact, Marina's cousin, a man Marina barely knew.
My stomach twisted. They'd built an entire fake vendor network, using Marina's business as their cash machine. They weren't just draining her, they were laundering through her, and she had absolutely no idea. This was beyond betrayal. This was criminal. I started researching Wade's family, public records, old addresses, business filings. A pattern emerged like a dark stain. Failed ventures, debt collectors, short-lived consulting companies that vanished after a year. One incident involved a lawsuit claiming misappropriation of funds that mysteriously disappeared after a settlement. It all made sense now. The mansion celebration, the praise, the pressure on Marina. They didn't love Marina. They loved her money. She had become their escape from financial ruin. They were parasites dressed as family. The realization made my hands tremble with a rage I hadn't felt in years. My daughter wasn't just being used. She was being hunted from the inside. By midnight, I had gathered everything. Bank logs, forged signatures, fake invoices, suspicious transfers, corporate ties. I organized them meticulously into a thick chronological folder. Every page told a story Marina didn't know she was living. I added a note on top. Read this when you're alone. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was steel. This wasn't about revenge. This was about saving my daughter from a family that saw her as a wallet with a heartbeat. As I sealed the envelope, I whispered to myself, this ends tomorrow. And for the first time since Christmas night, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in days: control. When I mapped out every transaction, company link, and fake invoice, a horrifying structure emerged. Wade's family wasn't disorganized, they were strategic. Each relative played a role. Phoebe received the gifts, Wade handled the paperwork, his cousin ran the fake suppliers, and his sisters funneled money through personal accounts labeled as family services. It was a full network designed to siphon Marina's finances without ever raising her suspicion. They'd done this before, just never with someone as wealthy as my daughter. She hadn't married into a family. She'd married into a coordinated financial trap. And the worst part, they acted so warm, so welcoming, so loving that Marina mistook exploitation for affection. Looking back,
I realized how they had targeted Marina's kindness from the beginning. She grew up generous to a fault, always believing the best in everyone. Wade knew exactly how to weaponize that softness. He complimented her big heart, then used guilt to steer her decisions. Meanwhile, Phoebe played the fragile motherly figure who needed help to maintain her lifestyle. Marina, desperate to be accepted, blindly filled their needs. She mistook manipulation for love, dependence for closeness. And each time I tried to gently warn her, she brushed it off, insisting I was overreacting. She didn't see the chains forming around her. She didn't see the emotional grooming, but I did. And it made every discovery hurt even more. Phoebe's act was the most polished. She didn't steal outright. She orchestrated pity. She played the poor widow, the lonely mother, the supportive matriarch who just needed a little help to stay afloat. But behind the scenes, she encouraged Wade to push for financial access, coached him on how to present expenses as family obligations, and whispered doubts into Marina's ear whenever she tried to make independent decisions. She weaponized gratitude. She weaponized motherhood. Every gesture, every tear, every hug was calculated. She wanted what Marina had, her wealth, her security, her status, and she hid her greed beneath a mask of gentle concern, so convincing that even I once questioned my instincts, until the truth became impossible to ignore. One night, curiosity turned into decisive action when I saw Phoebe, Wade, and his sisters leave their house unusually late. I followed quietly, keeping a safe distance. They drove across town to a small office building with dim lights. Inside, through the tinted windows, I saw them gathered around a table, documents spread everywhere. Wade pointed at folders, Phoebe nodded, and his sisters typed rapidly on laptops. They weren't celebrating anything. They were coordinating, planning, refining their system. The seriousness on their faces confirmed everything I feared. This wasn't a family in financial trouble. This was a cartel of manipulation, feeding off my daughter's earnings and plotting how to take more. My blood boiled, and I knew I needed airtight proof. The next day, while Marina was at work, I visited her home pretending to drop off a forgotten gift. Phoebe wasn't there, but her room door was slightly open. Something told me to look. Inside, under her vanity, I noticed faint scratch marks on the floor, like something heavy was frequently moved. I slid the cabinet aside and found it, a small steel safe bolted to the floor. My heart pounded. I couldn't open it, but I photographed everything: its placement, the model number, the wear marks, even the dust pattern around it. People don't keep safes in someone else's house unless they're hiding something. And knowing Phoebe, the contents inside weren't jewels or heirlooms. They were documents, receipts, proof. That evening, I returned pretending I'd left my gloves behind. As I passed the hallway, I heard voices, Phoebe and Wade arguing in low, sharp tones. I quietly pressed my phone against the wall and hit record. Wade hissed, "She's going to notice the money missing." Phoebe snapped back, "Then keep her distracted. Cry if you have to. She's emotional. Use it." My stomach turned. Wade added, "If she checks the vendors, we're done." Phoebe's final whisper chilled me. "That's why the safe stays hidden. Once we bleed her dry, we walk away." I nearly dropped my phone. Their words confirmed everything. Their intentions, their cruelty, their plan. And now I had their confession. By the time I got home, I had everything: forged signatures, financial trails, the hidden safe, the coordinated meetings, and now the recorded confession. It was no longer suspected. It was a complete map of their exploitation. I sat at my dining table, staring at the folder thick with evidence. I thought about Marina's trembling hands, her forced smile, her shrinking confidence. She had no idea she was being drained emotionally, financially, psychologically. And the people doing it pretended to love her. I sealed the folder, added one final label, "For Marina only," and took a deep breath. Tomorrow her world would break apart, but it would finally break in the right direction. At sunrise, I drove to Marina's house with the envelope resting heavily on the passenger seat. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the knowledge that what I was about to do would change her life forever. I placed the folder on her doorstep, neat, centered, impossible to miss. Inside, it was everything: the forged signatures, the bank logs, the fake invoices, the recorded confession. Before leaving, I whispered a silent prayer that she would read it alone. As I drove away, I imagined her waking up, finding the envelope, opening it with innocent curiosity, only for the truth to collapse her entire world. It had to happen. She needed to see the monster she married, and the family who helped him feed. By noon, my phone rang. Wade's name flashed across the screen. His voice came through frantic, trembling, demanding. "What did you do?" he hissed, desperation leaking through every word. I could hear doors slamming behind him, Marina crying in the background, and Phoebe shouting instructions. He wasn't angry, he was terrified. Terrified because the evidence was undeniable. Terrified because Marina finally had what he couldn't spin, twist, or manipulate. "You're ruining our family," he spat. But his fear wasn't about losing Marina. It was about losing access to her money. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "Truth ruins nothing. Lies do." He fell silent. And in that silence, I knew everything had detonated exactly as planned. A few hours later, Marina called me, her voice small, broken, trembling like a child lost in the storm. "Mom, why didn't I see it?" she whispered between sobs. I could hear her pacing, could picture her tears falling onto the document spread across her floor. She told me she had locked herself in the guest room while Wade banged on the door, insisting everything was a misunderstanding. But the evidence screamed otherwise. Marina said seeing the forged signatures felt like watching her trust being butchered on paper. Hearing Phoebe's recorded voice shattered whatever illusion she had left. "They used me," she cried. I didn't say "I told you so." I told her the truth. "You're waking up." And that's strength. That evening, Marina called a family meeting. Wade arrived sweating, defensive, unpredictable. Phoebe marched in rehearsed and offended, her daughters trailing behind like backup dancers. When Marina laid the documents on the table, the room froze. Wade tried to laugh it off, calling it creative accounting. Phoebe clutched her chest dramatically, insisting she was being attacked. But Marina wasn't the quiet girl they were used to manipulating. Her voice cracked like thunder when she said, "You forged my signature." The room erupted, shouting, denial, excuses. Wade lunged to grab the documents, but Marina slapped his hand away. For the first time, Wade's mask slipped, revealing the predator beneath, and every person in that room saw it. In the middle of the chaos, Marina made a call to her boutique's accountant, Mr. Keller. When he arrived, his face was pale. He admitted he had been intimidated into cooperating, subtly threatened by Wade to approve certain transactions or lose his position. He confessed he had always suspected wrongdoing but feared speaking up because Wade's family had a reputation for retaliation. The room fell silent as he described how invoices were altered, how payments were rerouted, how Marina's financial identity was used like a tool. Phoebe tried to cut him off, but Marina raised a hand, silencing her. Hearing the truth from an outsider, not her mother, not her fears, broke the last thread of denial she clung to. Cornered, exposed, and desperate, Phoebe resorted to her final weapon, fake tears. She grabbed Marina's hands, sobbing, claiming she never meant harm, that she only wanted family unity. But her performance cracked when Marina pulled out the recording. The moment she heard her own voice instructing Wade to keep her distracted, her expression shifted, just for half a second, from sorrow to venom. Everyone saw it. Even Wade's sisters stepped back in dismay at her empty act.
Horrified, Phoebe tried to blame stress, miscommunication, anything that would make her look like a victim. But the truth hovered over her like smoke. Marina looked her mother-in-law in the eye and whispered, "You never loved me. You loved my money." And Phoebe had no answer. Throughout the entire confrontation, I stood quietly in the corner, watching the truth dismantle every lie they built. My silence was deliberate. This wasn't my fight anymore. Marina needed to see their true nature without my guidance, without my voice coloring her judgment. And she did. She saw every mask fall, every manipulation crumble. When Wade tried to shift blame onto me, Marina cut him off sharply. When Phoebe attempted to guilt trip her, Marina refused to flinch. I didn't need to say a single word. My evidence had been spoken. Marina had awakened. And now she was ready to reclaim everything they stole: her money, her confidence, her life.
Hold on. What comes next is the moment everything flips. And before we step into it, hit subscribe so you're here for the ending.
Marina sat alone in her study, the thick envelope trembling in her hands. She had avoided opening it for days, terrified of what the documents might confirm. But tonight, she forced herself to read every page, every transaction, every deed, every quiet theft disguised as family support. Her eyes widened as she traced the timeline. Wade hadn't just taken advantage of her generosity, he'd positioned himself to drain her entirely. Worse, Phoebe had helped him, smiling sweetly while moving money behind her back. Marina felt her chest tighten, not from sadness, but from a rising, icy clarity. They weren't family, they were predators, and they had just made their last mistake. Wade strutted into the house that evening, humming as if the world belonged to him. He didn't know Marina had already spoken to her attorney. He didn't know every account had been frozen, every transfer blocked, every loophole sealed shut. When he tried to access her funds, nothing. When he tried again, still nothing. His face was drained of color. Marina watched him from across the room, her expression calm, almost serene. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. Wade stammered, sweating, clicking through screens like a drowning man grabbing the air. His downfall didn't require shouting. It arrived in silence, in the realization that the woman he underestimated had outplayed him completely. Phoebe was still bragging about her future beach lifestyle when the doorbell rang. A courier handed her a formal notice. Marina had legally reclaimed the mansion gifted to her mother-in-law. The title had reverted back.
The keys were due within 48 hours. Phoebe's smile collapsed instantly. She screamed for Wade, waving the papers like they were on fire. Marina didn't raise her voice when she explained. "It was purchased under my name. I simply corrected my mistake." Phoebe sputtered, calling her ungrateful, cruel, heartless, every insult she could think of. But Marina had already turned away. The mansion they thought they had won was never theirs. And now, they had nothing left to take. Wade begged to talk, begged for time, begged for forgiveness. But Marina had heard enough. Her lawyer arrived early the next morning with documents that ended Wade's access to her finances, properties, and future investments. Wade tried charming her, then guilt-tripping her, then threatening to reveal things. Marina didn't flinch. She had every receipt, every recording of his false promises, every detail of his manipulation meticulously documented. The legal separation moved quickly, and by noon, Wade was removed from every account and property ledger he once relied on. For the first time, Marina saw him without the mask, desperate, fragile, and furious that the power he abused had been ripped from his hands. Evelyn didn't want to confront Phoebe, but she had reached her limit. She walked into the mansion Phoebe was being forced to vacate, finding her surrounded by half-packed boxes in rage. Phoebe exploded the moment she saw her. "Your daughter ruined my life," she shouted. Evelyn stood calmly, letting the strong burn out. Then she said, "No, you ruined hers by using her kindness as your currency." Phoebe snapped back about loyalty, about entitlement, about how Wade deserved everything Marina had. Her voice didn't rise once. "You mistook generosity for weakness," she said, "but you were wrong." Phoebe stared at her, stunned that the quiet mother she ignored had finally spoken the truth aloud. Marina stood in her empty living room, the space quiet and peaceful for the first time in years. No pretended affection, no manipulative sweetness, no false crises engineered to drain her. She brewed tea, sat by the window, and felt something
She hadn't experienced in years: freedom. She reviewed her finances with her advisor, reorganized her investments, and set clear boundaries for her future. She even restored parts of her old routine: sunrise walks, charity work, and late-night reading without interruption. Her independence wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, grounded, and earned through pain. And as she watched the sunset, Marina realized she had reclaimed more than her money. She had reclaimed herself. Evelyn stopped by that evening carrying homemade soup and a soft smile. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. Marina thought for a moment. "Lighter," she said. They sat together, mother and daughter, the room warm with calm instead of chaos. Evelyn had watched her daughter suffer silently for too long, and now she watched her rise, quietly, gracefully, powerfully. Marina reached into a drawer and handed her something: the deed to a peaceful lake cottage, Evelyn's real Christmas gift. Not flashy, not loud, but meaningful, earned, deserved. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, not because of the property, but because her daughter had finally broken free. And this time, no one could take anything from her again.